Blog Talk Radio.
Carol the Coach. Sex, love, and relationships. We talk about it here.
Carol the Coach. Compassion with contemporary relevance.
I am a psychotherapist. I can be your personal life coach, and I can help you with your issues. There are no problems too small or too big. You can talk about anything.
Speaker, columnist, radio TV host, and commentator. Carol the Coach brings messages of wellness and empowerment within reach of everyday people every day.
Almost 5 years ago, I lost my soulmate in an accident. He was killed in a plane crash. Life just, for me, has seemed to stop.
There are groups all over the city. I teach one. It is a specific way to start thinking so that you shift how you see the world, which then shifts your energy, and then you feel better and you actually see things differently.
Carol the Coach, always available too at carolthecoach.com.
Now I've got Russell on the line.
I'm 47 years old. I'm a truck driver. I'm married. I have a wife in San Francisco.
Okay.
I haven't been home in 6 months. My thing is, I don't know if I have a sex addiction or what the problem is. Why do I want what I can't have? And as soon as I can have it, I don't want it anymore.
You're right on target when you say, I don't know if I have a sexual addiction. Well, guess what? Yes, you do. And you know what? That's my specialty, Russell, so you're at the right place. Continue.
I meet women online, and I'm in a different part of the country. I travel all 48 states, so I love sex.
I hear self-esteem issues. You never felt good enough, and you didn't feel like you were getting what you should have then, and you're reenacting that now. Do you want to change that about yourself? You get what you need. I got it.
And that's the big question, isn't it? Do you want to change your behaviors so that you're no longer driven to participate in behaviors that are actually against your own values, that compromise your relationships, and that make you feel shame and blame and guilt? Hi, I'm Carol the Coach, and this is Sex Help with Carol the Coach. Here, you may be listening to me live through Blog Talk Radio. We are the only internet radio show that talks about sexual addiction, or you may be listening to me after the fact at iTunes. And you can go to iTunes and download every show I've ever done. And we are coming up on my year anniversary. That means 52 shows I've done. And I'm here to bring you the newest and the best information from the experts in the field. And I know that if you've been following me on Facebook, you thought Rob Weiss was going to be on tonight, but he ended up having a different commitment. So he worked it out that his colleague, Sharon, could be on the show, and Sharon Hanlon is just an amazing woman. She has a depth of wisdom to offer. She actually is an officer at SRI. She knows her stuff when it comes to sexual addiction, and so we're going to be talking about sex addiction. We're going to be talking about her 2-week intensive program at SRI, and you are really in for a treat. Sharon is an amazing woman and has offered lots and lots of presentations. I went to one of hers last year at ITAP. It was on the butterfly technique, which is it's an EMDR kind of technique to take you back and anchor you into feelings and thoughts that you'd prefer to have as opposed to the ones that you may have in regards to trauma and uncomfortable situations. So she really is an amazing woman. We're going to have her on at about 9:15. In the meantime, did you know that Iceland wants to ban Internet porn? Yep, you got it. Iceland is working on banning Internet pornography. And they are saying that the explicit online images is a threat to children. Now, I've been doing radio and television now for over 20 years, and I really can appreciate freedom of speech, but I got to tell you, at some point as a society, I too believe that we need to take a look at what our communication, what our media is doing in regards to how is it forming children's brains. And so I agree with this Iceland. It's not a ruling yet because they're really just looking at the best technological ways to achieve not allowing kids to view porn. And so one of the things that they very clearly say is that there's a strong consensus building in Iceland. And Hala Guðnadóttir, an advisor to the nation's interior minister, told England's Daily Mail, "We have so many experts, from educationalists to the police and those who work with children, behind this. And this has become much more broad than just party politics. At the moment," he says, "we are looking at the best technical ways to achieve this. But surely, if we can send a man to the moon, we must be able to tackle porn on the Internet." Now, they say such a step is somewhat surprising among Western nations that, for the most part, champion free speech rights. But the move wouldn't be unprecedented in the island nation. Iceland has had laws banning the printing and distribution of pornography for years, and those laws haven't been updated to include the web. And 2 years ago, the nation's parliament banned strip clubs, saying that they violated the rights of women who work in them. Now, Iceland would become the first Western democracy to try and block pornography online. So you have to admit, this interior minister, Agmundur Johansson, has appointed committees to study the best methods for keeping young people from seeing explicit images and videos on computers, game consoles, and smartphones. Yay, you go, Prime Minister. The options being considered, according to the Daily Mail, include blocking the IP addresses of known porn sites and making it illegal to use credit cards from Iceland to subscribe to X-rated sites. This move is not anti-sex, it is anti-violence because young children are seeing porn and acting it out. That is where we draw the line, he says. This material is blurring the boundaries for young people about what is right and wrong. Now, attempting a total block of porn sites somewhere like the United States, with its legions of public and private portals into the web and the millions of software engineers who likely would spring into action to find workarounds, would be nearly impossible. But Iceland has a population of 322,000 people, roughly the same as St. Louis, Missouri, and that its remote location, 1,300 miles off the coast of Europe, would make jamming or blocking web traffic to certain sites easier if that was the route that the government chose. So you got to give Iceland credit. They're really taking a look at what they believe would help to protect kids. Now, the minister claims that he can create progressive legislation and that he is a man of principles and courage. And so he may be way off track in his attempts to place a shield around Iceland in order to stop porn from entering the country, but he truly is a man of conviction. A member of the Parliament committee studying the issue says a porn ban has near zero chance of passing Parliament and that they are wrong to find other ways the government can help protect children from web porn. I'm sorry, I misquoted this person. And the Parliament is definitely wanting to find other ways to protect children. And introducing censorship without compromising freedom of expression and speech is like trying to mix oil and water. It's impossible. I know my fellow MPs can often turn strange and dangerous laws into reality, but this won't be one of them. Well, we'll follow that story and let you know how Iceland is doing with it. I say good job at trying to protect kids from having to see this. Now, I got to tell you, that's how I got into this field. I would have calls from administrators from schools saying that they had kids that were practicing oral sex on the buses and that other kids were viewing it, were using their phones and recording it and then spreading it around to all their friends. And when these kids were interviewed, they said, I saw this at home when I either looked up a website, a porn website, or when I had found a porn website of my mother's or my father's. And so that's actually how I got introduced to knowing that I really wanted to help, initially, kids make better choices. And then what I found out is that their parents were really having difficulty, most oftentimes dads, but on some occasions moms, and they'd have long histories of pornography and pictures, and kids, being so technologically savvy, would find this stuff and then expose their friends to this stuff. And, instead of kids running home and going, what snack am I going to have today, they would run home to see what new pornography was available to them. And what we know is that lights up the brain, and as a result, obsessive-compulsive behaviors begin, and kids, unfortunately, are introduced to very compromising physicality between adults that they shouldn't have to see. Not even between adults. I mean, it can be bestiality. It can be against children. It can be a lot of different things, and I do believe we need to protect kids from that. That's just my take on it, but that is why I do this show, to educate and to help anybody figure out what they need to do to make healthier choices. And I had this other very interesting article, and it was from my colleague and guru, Dr. Patrick Carnes, and he was talking about how life has really changed for him. And I just want to read you an excerpt from a paper that he wrote. He said, it was a cold, late fall evening, and I was about to give my first address to the medical staff of Golden Valley Health Center. And for anybody who doesn't know, Patrick Carnes has started this movement of Sex Addicts Anonymous and sexual addiction. And he's the man that started the school that certified myself. And there are, 1,600 certified sexual addiction therapists now in the world. So this man has made it his life. He is the first to admit that he had a sexual addiction. He was a psychologist. When he became recovered, he made it his mission to help other people. And so he was getting ready to do this talk, and the facility was an 850-bed hospital located in suburban Minneapolis. It had a long and respected tradition as a psychiatric facility that also treated substance abuse. The year was 1984, and Out of the Shadows had appeared in January. Out of the Shadows is his first book that he wrote about sexual addiction. So he had just written the book, he was doing the talk, and he said, that there was real and substantive support in both the professional and the recovering communities for sexual addiction. And this very first inpatient program for sex addiction was set to open in January 1985. And his job that night was to be a keynote speaker for the annual medical staff dinner for close to 300 doctors, clinicians, and their spouses. His purpose was to kind of educate them. And what happened was, as he began to give his talk, a third of the staff walked out. They just got up and walked out, almost as if they had staged a coup, because they didn't understand this stuff, and they wondered what in the world was going on. So that is my buddy, Patrick Carnes, who has made it his mission to educate people, and that was 1984 when people didn't know how to react. And this is just a fascinating article that he has written. Okay, it looks like we have a caller. Hi, this is Carol the coach. How can I help you?
Oh, are you talking to me?
Yes, I am. Is this Sharon?
This is Sharon O'Hara.
Sharon O'Hara, how are you?
I'm great. I'm just trying to make sure I got here on time.
Well, you did a very nice job, and actually your number was kind of decoyed, so I thought I had a listener that wanted to call in. I would have answered it just a little bit differently, but I am so glad that you pitched. You just did a great job of standing in for Rob tonight, because we got a lot to talk about in regards to sexual addiction. Did you read that article that Patrick Carnes wrote about what it was like in 1984 when he gave his first presentation?
Well, interestingly, I was just talking to Patrick Carnes because over the last 4 or 5 days I was in Scottsdale at the symposium that he founded, sex addiction therapist in training. To be a sex addiction therapist, you get to be a CSAT, a certified sex addiction therapist, and once a year they have a workshop. They have a conference a symposium, actually, in Scottsdale, Arizona.
Yes,
and
I was there last year.
Well, I just came back yesterday, and so he was talking. It's the 30th anniversary of Out of the Shadows, which is the first book he wrote on sex addiction. It was called The Sexual Addiction at the time, and then it changed to Out of the Shadows. So he was going through the history to everybody there at the conference and reminded us all about how much it was, the whole topic of sex addiction was considered laughable, and how much he was personally vilified and made fun of and told he would never have a career. So it was very touching.
Now, I mean, he is definitely the father of sexual addiction and has just made it his life.
Right. I mean, he was really he was the founder of sex addiction treatment. The whole idea that there could be, otherwise it was just called womanizing or being or you were a nymphomaniac, depending on your gender.
Yeah.
But there was no sense that this was a real disorder. It was more you were a bad person.
Absolutely, and boy, thank goodness we're really changing that. I think certified sexual addictions therapists have really helped to get the word out, and certainly there still continues to be stigma, but at the same time, we've made great changes and great growth, and you have been a major person at that. You speak at almost every conference and symposium that's out there, don't you?
That's true. I spoke a little bit at this one, but Patrick Carnes hired me in 1992 at Del Amo Hospital, where he started a program, and then I did private practice for 10 years, and then I've been working at the Sexual Recovery Institute for a little over 4 years now, since January 2009.
Well, and I know I've had several clients go out to SRI, and they have really found that program to be extremely beneficial in establishing good, solid sobriety, as well as really helping to get to a lot of the trauma that they experienced that set them up for sexual addiction.
Yes, I think of it as a real, we're famous for a 2-week intensive that people come from all over the country and the world, actually. We've had people from Japan and Australia and London and all kinds of places, recently South America even. If they speak English, then we do this 12-day, 2-week intensive where people stay in a local sober living. So they get picked up at the airport, and they get fed and taken to meetings and back and forth to our 8 hours a day, 2-week program. So it's kind of an alternative to the inpatient programs that you have to take 4 to 6 weeks and very expensive. So the 2 weeks here is sort of a jump start in treatment or coming back from a relapse. And there aren't very many of those kind of programs. Many people don't realize. They think it's a hospital program or else once a week therapy, and we're sort of in between.
Okay, so one more time, you said it's a 12-day intensive.
Right,
so
8 hours a day.
8 hours a day for 12 days, and you actually make it easy enough that you pick the person up at the airport and then bring them to the facility?
To the sober living, and it's where they start. Typically that happens on a Sunday, and then they're brought over here Monday morning, and there are recovering guys over there who, so it's not only coming to treatment here where you have a minimum of 3 individual sessions and lots of groups and educational sessions and 12-step meetings every day, but also you get picked up by the guys at the Bridge. It's called the Bridge. and they take you back there. You do homework together. There are some fun activities even, because yes, recovery involves some non-sexual fun activities.
Right.
But you really feel a lot of camaraderie. So you're not just staying in a hotel. In the early days of SRI, people would stay in hotels, and then we'd have to figure out how to get them off. You know, there would be the temptation of the erotic movies on the hotel television. And so this way they're staying together. It's a nice place in a residential neighborhood, and they're fed, and they do their homework together, and they bond together. And for a lot of people who've been living in shame, which is almost all sex addicts, it's quite an interesting experience to tell their secrets and to have other people be supportive and grow from this, and then discover. Essentially, I think recovery is all about discovering who you really want to be when you grow up. And you start to have a sense of what's my we have people write a personal mission statement. And there's a lot of how can I become somebody that I could stand to live with.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because obviously part of the certification process for becoming a sexual addictions therapist is helping to heal the wounds and deal with the trauma, but the other part is coaching on how to take your life to the next level and how to create a mission statement. And so it sounds like you integrate both just beautifully.
Yes, I was thinking myself. You're called Carol the Coach, and
yes,
so
I am.
I'm sure that just trying to help people how, sex addiction recovery isn't just about stopping a behavior.
Right.
And that's what coaches do. It's about having a more, going towards the positive in life.
Right. Yeah, therapy is healing the wounds, and coaching is actualizing potential. So I'm glad to hear that there are fun activities. And so you're saying sober living is actually the place where they stay.
Right.
And then each day they are transported to SRI, and that's 12 days straight?
Yes.
And, a lot of times treatment centers will cost anywhere from $45,000 to $80,000.
Yeah, this is true.
Yeah, and that's typically for 30, 45, or 60 days. Is there a specific fee for people who might be interested in something a little bit shorter to jumpstart their recovery?
Well, this 2-week intensive is more in the $10,000, $11,000 range.
Okay.
We do work with people, so we sometimes people, their insurance will pay a good portion, if not all of it. But our intake guy, Bill Owen, at, can I say the number?
Oh, please do.
310-360-0130, or you can look us up on www.sexualrecovery.com. And Bill Owen or Tim are two guys who work in intake, and Bill has been doing this kind of thing for years and years, very easy to talk to. And we try to work with people. If they have a sincere interest in coming here and money is a problem, then we try to really work with them with coming up with something that, could allow them to come, because for a 2-week outpatient intensive, it's just easier to work with, than having to go for a month inpatient.
Well,
now,
yes,
sometimes,
obviously,
sometimes there are people who are, they're suicidal or something, and so they may need to have the greater security of inpatient. But most of the folks we see are, people who have, regular jobs, and they often have a spouse or a partner, and they just found themselves caught up in something that took over, and they can't seem to stop using their willpower, and so they need some extra help.
Well, absolutely. And let me just double-check. You said that number is 310-360-0130?
Right.
Okay,
or you can
and
Google
Bill
sexualrecovery.com.
Yes.
Bill Owen.
Bill Owen is somebody who has worked there forever and makes people feel comfortable and will discuss with the person whether it's the appropriate place to be.
Yes, exactly. And if for some reason this is not the best place, we refer to other places all the time. So
absolutely. And, one of the things that I really like is that I've received many referrals from SRI. I'm the only certified sexual addictions counselor in Indianapolis. And so obviously you all know through the web, through sexhelp.com, how to get people to experienced clinicians so that they can continue their recovery work with people that know how to appropriately treat them.
Yes, this is true. So we often, our goal is anybody who ever calls us, we want them to have at least some resource. So depending on where they live, we may be sending them to Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous or to Sex Addicts Anonymous or Sexaholics Anonymous. I mean, there's 5 or 6 different organizations now just for sexual recovery, and those are basically no cost, or you put $1 in the pot as the basket gets passed around. So, we want to make sure everybody has at least a resource, a 12-step meeting, a therapist, a short-term program, an inpatient program if they need that. We're trying to be, give people whatever resources we can find.
Well, and you and I know that there are better resources. Some resources are better than others, but clearly even people that don't have any of those 6 12-step groups in their area, there are always telemeetings, which obviously is done via the phone. So there's no reason for people not to get the appropriate help. They just have to know how to go about getting it, and SRI will help them with that.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
So let me ask you a little bit about sexual addiction in general. I mean, what do you believe is a good definition for sexual addiction?
Well, I think sexual addiction is when there's usually it's a series of behaviors, have not only become central to your life, but you are having powerful negative consequences, and you can't stop even though you are having powerful negative consequences. It's the can't stop, even when you want to, even when you try to, that I think is the hallmark of sex addiction. More than, for example, some people say, well, if I have 2 affairs, is it sex addiction, or do I have to have 10 affairs? As if an alcoholic is decided between 2 drinks and 10 drinks.
Right.
So it's not the number of drinks that makes a person an alcoholic, it's the effect that it has on you and the sense of out of control. And that's the same thing in sex addiction. It's that you end up going against your own values. You lead a secret life, and you often draw a line in the sand. I'm not going to go past this line, and then you find yourself going there anyway. So it's like, I'll just look at porn, I won't contact anybody. And then you're, instant messaging, or you find yourself, doing some emailing back and forth. Or then it's, well, I won't see a real-life person. And then the next thing you know, you're seeing a prostitute. Or I'll look at this porn, but I won't look at anybody young. And the next thing you know, you're looking at teens. Or there's always a line that people start crossing that they didn't think they would to start with.
Oh, and that's an excellent point.
It's
so many people say, is this really a diagnosis? I mean, you referenced it earlier when you said that a lot of people say, isn't this just men being men? And so what's your belief? Do you feel, even though we're having trouble getting it in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, do you think it's a real diagnosis?
Well, I've been working with this for 21 years, and let me tell you, it's not going away.
No, it isn't.
I've just seen, on the one hand, I've seen some people really destroy their lives, and on the other hand, I've seen some real miracles happen, because deep down, this is truly an intimacy disorder. Mm-hmm. And one of the combinations that I've seen quite frequently is something I call sex addiction intimacy anorexia.
So explain what that is.
Well, that's where you might have a lot of sexual acting out, particularly on the computer or with prostitutes, but there's very little connection. Mm-hmm. So intimacy, it's the sense of that I won't get hurt, or I won't hurt my partner if I just do something sexual but have no feeling about it. I have no connection. I have no emotional feeling. So I'll just go kind of like take my body up to the sexual service station like a car and get serviced, And so you can have some intensity of sensation, but there's no true intimacy. There's no connection. And then it leaves you feeling kind of empty, like empty calories. And then, so this drives you to do this over and over, looking for more and more intensity that tends to escalate. So now I have to look at even more, lurid pictures or traumatic pictures or something, just try to get a kind of an intensity hit. And what that can do is get in the way of actually connecting with a real person, maybe even the person that you love or thought you loved at one time. So that's what I mean by intimacy anorexia, is often you're not even talking to your partner, or you're not even being sexual with somebody who might be quite willing, because that feels risky. It feels emotionally risky. So a lot of recovery is about learning the positive aspects of vulnerability.
So how would you treat that in a 12-day intensive? Because obviously you're right, sexual addiction is an intimacy disorder. So what might they do to get back in touch with developing closeness?
Well, interestingly, the number one thing is I think that men need to practice becoming more emotionally open with other men first, to be any good at it with women. And I think that's what happens with this whole idea of living together, working together. So most people think intimacy means sexual, but we're talking emotional intimacy means actually sharing secrets, saying how you really feel about things, or maybe something you never. Most of our guys, by the third day, they're already telling secrets they thought they would take to the grave with them. And there's something profound that happens through that experience. You start feeling lighter. You start feeling better about yourself, and then you start having much more willingness to. It's like, oh, maybe I could grow into the person I've always wanted to be, but never thought. Most of our sex addicts, it's like if you really knew who I am, you wouldn't like me. They feel profoundly unlovable. If you really knew who I am, or what I really think about, or what really images haunt me. And yeah, many of them are trauma-based, and they're connected to various kinds of abuse that happened, or things they were introduced to at too young an age. And so, people get caught up in trauma repetition. But
for our listeners that may not know, how would you describe trauma repetition?
Well, trauma repetition is when maybe there was somebody who touched you inappropriately when you were younger, or did something, or there was somebody who criticized you or humiliated you or whatever, and then later on in life you sort of feel yourself drawn to replaying the essential dynamics of the situation, but with a sexual hit attached. So that, for example, I had a guy who was sexually molested by almost a gang of older boys when he was about 11, and they were like 17, 18. And later on in life, he found himself drawn to paying men to repeat this abuse. But since he chose it gave him some kind of sense of psychological mastery. The problem was that he couldn't stop doing this behavior over and over, even though he was married and had children and did not consider himself what you might think of as gay. He had to replay this scenario using the same objects that had originally, because that way he didn't feel like a victim.
Well, that makes all the sense in the world. So in lots of ways, he's reenacting the trauma, but this time he's got control. He's made the choice, and so it allows him to feel better about the situation
right.
on one level. But again, then he
Right.
feels all that shame because he knows that it's not healthy, the behaviors he's exhibiting.
Right. So he's hooked on this whole scenario, but at least we helped him to understand that that it wasn't his fault and that it didn't say bad things about him, but that he needed to unhook himself from these compulsive behaviors in order to really have a true connection with the people in his life that he loved. So that's one form of trauma repetition. A lot of it, I think, has to do with, there seems to be a growing emphasis with S&M fascination.
Mm-hmm.
And there may be some S&M that consenting adults could do, and, I don't know. I'm not here to judge anybody for, what they want to do sexually, but I'm talking about people who get into secret, destructive, role plays where they feel driven to do really humiliating things, and it gets in the way of the success of their relationships. So I've noticed a growth in that. Some women sex addicts find that's a scenario that really calls to them, and some men as well. But the more it tends to lead to more and more intensity. So you have that same problem of escalation, can't stop.
Well, and unfortunately, all over the country, there are parties and all sorts of things that specifically fit this niche, and it increases that escalation too. Now, I have a lot of wives that have looked into their husband's porn histories and have seen this kind of degradation, and they think, who am I married to? I'm married to a monster. They can't even imagine that their partner would be interested or intrigued or addicted to this type of pornography. So it really, it's traumatic for the person, but it's also very traumatic for family members that find this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think that the people, honestly, who are in the most pain are usually the spouses or the partners, because they often have such a shock. I mean, there's a lot of shame that the addict experiences, but the surprise, it's often that the partner is just shocked. Like, who, you mean I've been living a lie for 20 years, 30 years? Or there's often a really profound shock to the system of, who is this person I've been living with all this time?
Mm-hmm.
And especially when you come upon certain kinds of porn that are just really startling. And so yes, so they're in a lot of pain, and maybe I have children with this person, or do I stay? Do I go? I mean, many folks think, well, just leave the bastard. You see a lot of well-meaning people say, but life is complicated, and there are a lot of reasons to maybe not make a serious decision initially in the middle of trauma, but to look into if there is some way to recover from this. Might there be a way to rebuild trust? That's the number one question. I want to say another thing about the spouses, and that's the idea that the thing that hurts them the most is the lying. Most of them, they'd be willing to get over, the fact that somebody looked at porn or even saw a prostitute. It's the lying that is the deal killer.
Right, that's the ultimate foundation of trust, and they can't believe that they can't trust the person then.
Right, and they don't think they'll ever be able to, and yet that is exactly where I've seen some miracles happen, is with the folks who both parties have the courage to be willing to work on their separate recoveries, and then on the couple recovery after that. I truly think there's a special place in whatever heaven is for the folks who have the courage to go through all of that. I've seen some remarkable things happen with people who have been willing to face their dark side and to open up their hearts to a larger way of loving and accepting.
Now, as you talk about SRI, obviously the 12-day intensive, does SRI also host, is it also a residential treatment center for longer periods of time?
It's not a residential treatment center. But we do have ongoing outpatient groups. Or we have 2 groups ongoing weekly basis, 2-hour groups for spouses, and we have about 4 or 5 different groups for addicts, and we have 1 group for people who did some, broke the law and did some sexual offending, but it's nonviolent, kind of, like maybe peeping Tom or exhibitionist kind of behavior, and. So, yes, we have ongoing weekly groups. Mostly those are for people who live here in Los Angeles.
Well, I was going to say, so you're located in Los Angeles. And the 12-day intensive, is that for men only or are women also?
No, that's men only. Okay. We do, during the second week, invite spouses to come. And we encourage them to go to Esalen or COSA, and then we provide a full day of activities for them with a couples therapist, so that they can have a session with their addict while they're here, educational sessions, resourcing sessions, extra individual sessions if they want that. So they have a whole day, no extra charge, of help just for the spouse.
Well, that's wonderful. Yeah, because obviously I'm always talking to my addicts and their partners about, it both really requires that you both heal from this. And although I do believe that one person can get that initial help and make dramatic changes in their relationship, it just goes a lot faster if both people become educated and work on themselves in recovery.
Right.
So what would you advise a loving wife, partner, or spouse who thinks they are involved with a sex addict to do?
Okay, well, what I think they should really do is to, first of all, educate themselves by reading Mending a Shattered Heart by Stephanie Carnes or Your Sexually Addicted Spouse. Those are a couple of books that we found helpful.
Now, who wrote Your Sexually Addicted Spouse? Do you remember?
2 people whose name I can't remember.
Okay, thank you anyway. Go ahead.
Yes, and then yes. So I think that education is a good thing, and then what they can do is try to find a therapist that can help them from the same list of CSAT professionals, either at the itap.com website or sashed.net, sash.net, also has sex addiction specialists, or just call us and we will look up these therapists for you.
Okay, and again, for anybody who's listening, I'm talking with Sharon, who works for SRI, and she highly recommends www.sexualrecovery.com, and the phone number is 310-360-0130. And so you're really saying that you're a resource center to get people to the right place no matter what level they need.
Yes. And I just have my coworkers waving at me, so I'm going to have to go here.
Okay.
But I did want to, thank you so much for this, and we would like to help anybody who wants to call us. We would like to give them some kind of help, low cost, no cost, or coming to SRI or inpatient program, if that's what they want.
Well, absolutely. Thank you so much for being on the show and helping our listeners. And, I'll be continuing to send referrals to SRI, so I just so appreciate it. Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you so much, and I hope I see you again soon at one of these conferences.
Yes. I'll reintroduce myself because I did do your Butterfly Tap conference last year.
Okay. All right. I'd love to see you again.
Okay, take care.
Thank you so much.
Uh-huh.
Bye for now.
Bye for now. All right. Yes, if you have any questions, now would be a great time to check in. The number to call in is 646-595-3284. That is the show. And you can ask any questions if you've been listening to Sharon live. I'm Carol the Coach, and I am here to help you with hope, strength, and recovery. This is the show that helps you with sexual addiction and gets you to the right place and gets you educated. And Sharon was saying when she works with partners, the first thing she does is she recommends either Your Sexually Addicted Spouse, the book, or Mending the Shattered Heart by Stephanie Carnes, because they're two very important books on what are the signs if your partner may be a sex addict, and what feelings are normal, what do you do with your feelings, how do you not do too much. So many addicts have partners that want to do all their work for them. And so it's important, no matter who in your family has a problem, to have that delicate balance between wanting to be supportive and help and not doing too much of the work yourself. I really believe that it's essential to not do this on your own, and that itself can be very, very difficult. We've come a long way since 1984, and as I was sharing with you at the beginning of the show, when Patrick Carnes was going to educate and talk about the program that he was getting started, he was in the midst of this facility, and there was a reception that year in which he was going to speak, and he was very excited, and so he started to talk some about the program, and his job that night was to be the keynote speaker for the annual medical staff dinner. And there were over 300 doctors, clinicians, and their spouses that had attended this program. And he was going to underline the importance of this new sexual addiction programming and orient for the first time professionals as to what sexual addiction was and what strategies worked best. And he said one example that he had was a letter from the wife of a physician who had joined Sex Addicts Anonymous, that's SAA for short, and she received treatment. And it was a moving tribute to the power of treatment and her gratitude for the help received. And she knew that there was much work to be done, but she was really excited and grateful for what she was getting. Now, Patrick knew that there were spouses in the audience as well as doctors that may have had some of these same problems and who may have shared some of the same sentiments anonymously. So he was ready, but he was not prepared for what happened, because after that supper at this reception with over 300 doctors and counselors and their spouses, the hospital administrator went to the podium, introduced Dr. Patrick Carnes, and there was a staged walkout. Suddenly, about half of the audience simply got up and left, and they were led by some of the most significant psychiatric medical staff that Dr. Carnes had ever met. Even more stunning to Dr. Carnes was that key members of the administrative staff had joined the exodus in protest to the hospital opening a sex addictions program. Now, Dr. Carnes said, over my career, I've had critics, hecklers, and reluctant staff members, but that moment was a defining moment in which he could see that he was clearly not welcome, nor was his recovery program. He remembered the spotlight. He said, I remember the spotlight being on me and everyone waiting for what I would say. I stood there, notes and letter in hand, transfixed with the fear that I had no right to be there. I wondered if I should walk away, but then I looked at that letter and knew I needed to speak the truth. So I stepped forward and with a somewhat halting voice thanked those who had stayed and told them why I was there. Okay, so, that's the kind of resistance he met with. And I got to tell you, that was 1985, and 22 years later, I am running into some of the same problems. when I wanted to orient a facility here in Indianapolis that treats drug and alcohol addiction. And I wanted to orient them about sexual addiction because what we know is when somebody works on their drug or alcohol addiction and they get that under control, many times their sexual addiction gets worse. And yet the staff in some of these hospitals, they don't know to ask about sexual addiction, so they don't even know that it's a problem. And when I asked if I could, for free, orient the staff and do a staff in service and training, I was told that this hospital received a lot of generous donations, and if I were to orient and staff and educate the hospital on sexual addiction, they feared that they'd lose much of their donations. Well, you can see why they wouldn't want to take a chance. I mean, hospitals are in a situation where they really do need their monies to survive, and yet at the same time, we're really doing a disservice by not teaching the staff to ask the right questions to help the clients, so that one addiction gets better while the other one gets worse. So I get how difficult the battle was for Dr. Carnes. And then he said, at the time, Golden Valley was owned by CompCare Corporation, and its president was Dr. Richard Santoni. He and I spent afternoons together reviewing data and causes about sex addiction. His resolve pushed all of us to opening the program on time. And once open, a transformation occurred. The patients were profoundly grateful to have a place that understood their problem. Compared to most patients in the facility, they were not only hurting, but they were also motivated. And soon, the sexual dependency units became the place where everyone wanted to work. Even the physicians who had walked out during my address changed their minds. And when patients came, the legitimacy of the problem was clearly established. The reputation for breaking new ground and being of genuine help compared to the revolving psychiatric doors characteristic of the day was more than attractive. Plus, in 1985, physicians would be paid by patient as a separate bill. With $265 a day at stake, those who walked out the night of my talk now demanded to be put on the rotation list. So then, new institutional battle lines were drawn. The word spread that these were interesting, motivated patients who could afford to pay. Doctors wanted to be there, new patients, doctors, but they did not have the time to go through the training to understand what the staff was asking of the patients in the program. Thus, you had doctors giving well-meaning but ill-informed advice that was contrary to the precepts of the program. A training program was necessary. And so Dr. Carnes said, what did I need to do next? I needed to help train physicians and clinicians appropriately to do the best work possible. And as you can see, he's a man that never gave up. And so, truly, he's one of my heroes, and I'm just so thankful that I have gotten to work with him. And a lot of things have changed since 1985. He talked about being on Oprah Winfrey that brought over 11,000 calls to the hospital seeking help. He was somewhat put down on that show. And he remembered that there was a lot of resistance there. And yet, there were a lot of people that got the help they needed by seeing him on something as popular as the Oprah Winfrey Show. So he just talks about a lot of the changes that have occurred and how we as therapists really need to promote sex addiction training and treatment. And so that is why I do the show. And I can't thank you enough for being a listener. If you have any questions, you can give me a call, 646-595-3284. And you feel free to always send me an email at carolthecoach@AOL.com. Go to my websites, the one on sexual addiction, it's called Sex Help with Carol the Coach. And then the other one, which is my coaching website, and that is carolthecoach.com. There's plenty of resources out there for you, and I, like SRI, will be happy to guide you in the right direction. And so as I end every show with my statement, there will only be one of you at all times. I want you to fearlessly have the courage to be yourself. Next week, we're going to be doing a rerun of a very popular show, and then the following week I will return on March 4th, and I'm going to be interviewing some renowned experts in the field of sexual addiction all through March, so stay tuned in. I'm really looking forward to being with you for another week of Sex Help with Carol the Coach. Have a great night.